Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rich as our next speaker this afternoon.
Oh, was it? Okay. Should I explain that? Fun fact, are the students still here? Maybe later, maybe later. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this industry that we're in. I think these are pretty impressive numbers. The wow factor is we go from a $400 billion industry in 2000 to a $1.6 trillion industry this year. And if just you want to put into context the difference between billions and trillions, if we looked at it in seconds, 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. That's a massive jump. So that's the wow. How? How did we do it? Well, a lot of us in this room, a lot of people in this room, entities in this room that help the pharma companies promote had a lot to do with that, because the advertising and the marketing expenses, the SG&A, the percentage of revenues that go toward marketing and sales is pretty substantial in this industry. So that's great. Congratulations for everybody that works on that. But now, I don't think ads and tactics and campaigns equal engagement. And if patient and HCP engagement were a drug, it would be the blockbuster of the century, and it would be malpractice not to use it. So that looking good doesn't always equal feeling good. Human sentiment is what drives human decisions, and I'll share a little bit about how. So these are extreme examples of some things pharma has done in the past, that mostly extremely bad. I didn't want to call it anything current and insult anybody, but they represent a gap in our opportunities. How do we get to this point of showing things like this in front of people? How do we get to a point where we would spend $5 million to put a toe in a football helmet with fungus on it in front of a Super Bowl audience? How do we get there? This is how we get there. I'll let this sit with you for a second. You picking up on what's happening here? So it's kind of like this. There's your campaign, and there's your customer. How did that happen? How did that happen? I don't know. Maybe we never talked to a customer. Maybe we did some research, right? Jeff Bezos apparently says, always leave an open chair for the customer in a meeting. I'm like, well, why the hell wouldn't they actually be in the meeting? Why would you have an empty chair for them? So what did the customer actually want? Well, in this case, they wanted to play. They wanted to feel like they were flying. They wanted to be joyful. They wanted to feel good. So what did they need to decide and act? I believe that every treatment decision a professional or consumer makes is dozens of clinical and logical decisions in search of a single emotional one. And I'll fight you in the parking lot if you can prove to me differently. This is what happens. This is how we decide. We decide with our heart and we justify with our wallet. How do we feel good, though, on the path to feeling better? As a patient, when you're in a really bad place, how are you going to feel good about that? Or how are you going to feel the best you could? Let's look at an experiment. This was done between Stanford and Harvard, and they designed the emotional and the behavioral engagements around the data. So we all know exercise makes us feel good. We all know it reduces our risk of physical and emotional, but data is not the motivating factor. And in this case, they worked with hotel maids. And so for one group of 84 hotel maids, they told them to view the work that they do as exercise. This is exercise. This is a workout. So they changed their mindset. The other group, control group, just view it as work. Well, what happened? In 4 weeks, while changing nothing other than their mindset, weight went down. Body fat went down, hip to waist ratio went down, blood pressure, systolic and diastolic, both went down among the 40 who viewed it as work. And Dr. Alia Crum, who conducted this study, said the total effect of anything is a combined product of what you're actually doing and your mindset around what you're doing. It's fascinating. Are we thinking about the physician or the customer mindset. That physician, when you walk in, we've had talk about how busy they are, how stressed they are. They have to back into the room because they're capitated to 12 minutes. Are we doing what we can to be cognizant of their time? Patients. Are we dealing with a frightened patient, a confused one, an angry one, a bitter one? If we don't know, how are we serving them? Like, look at it like this. What happens when customers feel good? These are some really basic examples. And by what percent do you think mints on the check increase gratuity? Any guesses? C, 3.3%. I don't know why. They're nasty. I don't eat them. Empathetic statements by physicians reduce patients' thoughts of litigation by what? They're all C, 13%. The $1.50 hot dog at Costco. Since 1985, that hot dog has cost $1.50. 92.9% renewal rate, which is attributed partially to the hot dog. So much so that when their CEO was departing, their founder, he looked at the incoming CEO and he said, if you change the price of the fucking hot dog, I will kill you. And he was not kidding. Because clearly, they're onto another CEO, and it's still $1.50. So the question becomes, does helping pharma customers feel good really matter? Are we doing well by doing good? So let's talk about what that might look like. Well, experiences shift emotions. Wayne talked a little bit about the study on the left here from DT Consulting, so 6,000 MDs around the world. What drives your prescription decision? Well, 50% of it is your price of entry. It got you into the concert hall. What got you up to the stage was the customer experience you created, right? And your company reputation. And we focus on safety and efficacy. We go and say, doctor, my drug's safe and of course it's safe and efficacious. It wouldn't be approved. Across Health did another study. They focused on net promoter score, which is a nefarious metric, but they looked at 9s and 10s, which are promoters, like passives are 7s and 8s, and everybody else is a detractor. Explain that to me. But promoters, 9s and 10s, are not promoters because you're safe and efficacious. They're promoters because of the experience. And promoters prescribe more. Trista mentioned the book yesterday, Compassionomics. Well, this is the notion of experiences in medicine. When healthcare providers show compassion to a patient, which was the crux of this, they do better. And this is work by Tresiak and Mazzarelli. This is work by Dr. Kelly Harding in The Rabbit Effect. Fascinating book as well. And anything by Dr. Alia Crum, the work she's doing at Stanford on human behavior, all simply tells us this matters. It has clinical implications, plus and minus. Imagine your doctor's a complete jerk. Imagine they give you a medicine and say, here, take this. And you go and you have a really crappy experience getting it. And then you have another patient where the doctor puts their hand on their shoulder and says, look, I've used this with other patients and it's really worked. And I'm in this with you. Let's get you better. The office has already done everything with prior authorization. You're going to be able to pick the drug up. You are just going to do better, period, because you feel good about it. So all this means that trusted experiences have clinical implications. Well, and I love this work from Edelman and Trust Barometer. This is the health carve-out, which simply said, trust is a verb, right? These are the things, relevance, frequency, not frequency of your ads, frequency of your behaviors, your empathy. I think empathy is nice. I think, compassion is its more athletic cousin. So compassion means you did something. Accessibility, reliability, and proximity. Are you close to the customer? It's a fascinating study. If you haven't read it, I won't go into it. But this is how you build trust with customers. Let's talk a little bit about trust in the industry, though. Year over year, we've viewed HCPs, mostly nurses. The only time nurses were not number one was right after 9/11, and first responders were number one. But year over year, nurses are number one. Doctors, pharmacists, number one. So that's great. And then we've got like 50 feet of whale crap and business executives, car salespeople, and advertising practitioners. There's a little bit of a challenge there. But don't worry, this actually gets worse. And I'm going to show you how it gets worse. You can read my T-shirt later. In the court of opinion, of public opinion, if we look at the pharmaceutical industry, we're just ahead of the federal government. And please don't take this as me maligning the industry, because I love this industry. It's given me my life. Literally, it's giving me my life. Financially, it gave me my wife. I met my wife at a pharmaceutical company. We make products that change the course of disease and damage in the human body. It reverses the course of injury and illness. That is miraculous. You can't say that in your label, but it is miraculous when you think about it, right? Things we should have died from, we're now living with. I love this industry, but this is a challenge, particularly when you start to think about, we're using one of the other least trusted industries to communicate with the most trusted professions. And maybe it's not a matter of we shouldn't do advertising, maybe it's not a matter of we shouldn't do promotion, but we should rethink how we do it, and we should rethink what an engagement means. So we'll take a little break from causing a little bit of discomfort, and we're going to go to the Austrian Alps and talk about the Feel Good Index. This is a project that I'm working on. It's 3 years in, and these are the partners that I'm working with. It's the Austrian government, their Board of Tourism, some of my technology partners at Scriver and Kep2, and the tourist resorts for skiing and for hiking. And so we looked at this feeling good across the experience of booking a trip, not only for the customer, but for the colleagues, the employee experience, not only for the colleagues, but the citizens within the towns where people are coming. What does their experience feel like during this? And what we realized is this is all measurable and controllable. I want to define experience for you. The algebra of experience simply means that we enter into anything with expectations. You walk into the doctor's office, you walk into Wawa, you have expectations when you walk in. Your expectations, however, plus and minus the realities, what actually happens, that's your customer experience. Anybody who's making it more complicated for you, give me a call and I'll tell you some things about them. Then what happens? We take that customer experience and we divide that by the actions that we take when we find out we're falling short. We divide that by what we actually did to make reparations, what we actually did to make things better for that customer, and multiply that by the impact that it had. Again, controllable and measurable. And that's where the longevity, the loyalty of the customer can be moved by doing that. So here's what we did with the Feel Good Index. We looked at their expectations before the study. You're going off on this vacation, what do you expect? You expect great snow condition, you expect a great stay, you expect great food and wine, you're going to meet beautiful people, and then you're in this experience, and we measured what's happening in the experience, and then a few months after, so kind of the corollary here that I use all the time, has anybody ever gone to Disney with their kids? Are you financially recovered from that? Yeah. And at one moment, you're standing in line at Slinky Dog Ride. You got a $15 turkey leg in your arm. You got a $9 bottle of water. It's 98 degrees, and the sign says it's 2 hours. That sucks worse than anything. That's when you're in the stay, you're in the experience. And if we asked you, how's it going right now at Disney, you're going to tell us it kind of sucks. But then 2 months later, you look on your phone, and you see that picture of you and your kid on the Slinky Dog Ride, and it was the best vacation ever. It was amazing. So we had to control for reflection, because reflection can be really powerful. We might start to invest in correct things that maybe didn't matter. So this is what it kind of looked like. And the Feel Good Index looked at generations, and it looked at the weather conditions. It looked at the time of year. It looked at all the variables of where they stayed. Expectations across demographics extremely high. But then it looks like the Alps. Like you get into the experience, and it kind of goes down quite a bit, right? But then you look at reflection, and reflection doesn't quite meet expectations, but it's really powerful. And what we're trying to understand here is, where do people feel good and not feel good? The hypothesis, customer well-being is an important outcome of service in the experience journey, the lived journey, not the journey that was created and put up on the wall with like cool segments like fence sitters and stuff, like an actual lived journey, the messy journey, the validation, that V-shape, the deficits in expectation that caused low or no or bad feel good. The actions, tailoring the actions, what we started to see was, if we start to change the moments in real time or near real time, if we look at root cause and we change that bad experience for somebody else, like it took too long to check in for the hotel, that person's really frustrated. Can we fix that for the next 20 guests? Can we find the root cause of why it's taking so long? Can we find the root cause of the lines? Can we find the root cause of any other challenge and fix it? So when we looked at inner and outer loop and we started to correct things, what did we see? The impact was that those reflection scores, those loyalty scores, also started to go up. So how do we do this? We designed for emotional reassurance, not just for information, not just for operational metrics. We looked at experiential metrics, not clicks and visits and downloads, but sentiment. How did I feel good? What did I feel? And the mindset was what we think about what we're doing, Dr. Crumb's work. If you look at this, we talk about the flower all the time. We talked about the safety and the efficacy of the product, the availability of the product. Did Mario want the flower? No, he wanted to throw fireballs. Actually, he wanted peach, right? So are we thinking about what are the fireballs that our customer wants to throw? And are we enabling them and empowering them with the fireballs so they feel good about it? And this was the mindset that we undertook. And part of what we also thought about was we needed to put a little bit more gas in our tank. And by gas, it means give a shit. Like, we literally need to give a shit in the moment. Like, that's me going on that vacation. How would I feel about being in that vacation? So where do MDs feel good about you and your brand? And I used MDs here. I could have used consumers just as easily. Across the continuum, because they're very similar continuums: awareness, validation, and adoption. All right, those are where I'm setting my expectations. Prescribing, that's where consumption's happening. I've written a prescription for my customer. Did it cause me practice burden? Is it causing my patient burden? Am I getting a ton of phone calls because of something? Am I confused about the dosing per Mike's talk earlier, right? And then monitoring and advocacy, what happened afterwards. So the corollaries here were fascinating, and when I first met the guys at Innsbruck presenting this, I have created an index very similar in healthcare. I call that the happiness index, or the helpfulness index, excuse me. And the helpfulness index is not about our safety and efficacy, but are we showing up being helpful compliantly? Are we showing up as a partner? Are we listening and understanding our customers' needs and fulfilling them? We're supposed to make great medicine. All right? They expect that. Science is on everybody's side. What can differentiate us? So what happens when the V-shape shows up in launch promises and expectations to practice realities? It impacts reflection, it impacts perception, and it impacts loyalty. So what do we do to move it? Well, we observe. We look at how consumers are behaving. We look at how our customers are behaving. We ask them questions, right? Asking them questions via a questionnaire or a survey, that's going to give us the vocal minority, still powerful, not representative of the silent majority, but important. That's why we observe and we ask, right? Because them, in their own words, voice of customer, are telling us things that are really interesting. We analyze it, right? We analyze to understand what's actually happening here, why it's actually happening here. Can we understand it better? And then a lot of companies gather a lot of data, and they see a lot of problems, and the challenge is they don't take an action to correct it. And that's the worst thing you could possibly do. Like, just don't ask. Just don't observe at that point. If you don't intend to do something, gosh, you'll do more damage by asking people for feedback and not acting on it than you would if you never asked for feedback at all. And then measure the impact. If I change this, what did it mean? What did it change in terms of access? I worked on a program where post-engagement with the field reps, we sent out 5 very simple questions to the physician to understand that engagement and the relevance of that engagement. What we were ultimately measuring was trust. Are we having trustworthy engagements? Are we creating trust? Where there were deficits in trust, we fixed them. What did we find? Well, how they responded, when they responded, how quickly they responded, had an impact on trust. And guess what trust had an impact on? Access. We didn't measure all the way down to prescriptions, but the salespeople told me emphatically that when my rep gets in the door, that prescription's getting written. So I'm not so sure that's always true, but we were able to measurably impact access, which I thought was really fascinating. And then we repeat it because this is not done, this is not a tactic, this is not a campaign, it's ongoing. Thank you. So what if pharma customers felt good about you as a product and as a partner across the continuum? We must know this. We must know what their expectations are. These are things that we can find out inside of launch. Inside of launch prep, these are things we can find out in phase 3. What do they expect of us to the market, right? I did some work with one of the pharma companies that's here. We went all the way back to drug elicitation. And we asked patients and we asked doctors, if we were to create a molecule, if we were to create it, what would you want? What would you expect? How would you want it delivered? How would you want it priced? How would you want to feel? Like, we can't cure your disease, but what would you want? And then that data, voice of customer inside, went to the researchers and went to the scientists. So we're probably 10, 12 years out, but I'm very interested to see what does it look like when you put the voice of the patient and the parent and the provider inside of the drug development. We have to nurture and align the moments when we're actually intersecting and interacting with customers, when they're engaging with us, when they're in need of us, right? Understanding expectations should help us design for that. And then we have to understand the link. Are they prescribing? Are they loyal? Are they not? Why aren't they loyal? Is it something that happened back there? Is our competitor doing something? And if you don't think you're competing on reciprocity and experience, you are. The chart from DT Consulting told us that. But we're all focused on the 50%, and we're not focused on that 35% that people are longing for. There's not a double down on it. There's a bunch of, we were just having this conversation sitting at a table a moment ago. There's a lot of conversation out there in industry about customer experience. But what we're really talking about is push. We're not talking about gathering sentiment and gathering feedback from customers. So there's a difference in that, and be cautious of it. And look, maybe if we do this, we don't end up doing commercials where people are dancing about diabetes or singing about psoriasis. I don't know anybody that has psoriasis that sings about it. Yet when I turn on the TV, nothing's everything, right? And when I turn on the TV and there's a diabetes ad, there are literally people dancing around a fountain about their diabetes. I've yet to see that anywhere, ever. I've never, John, you spoke so beautifully yesterday. You've danced about any of it or sang about it? You made a Taylor Swift song about it, which I thought was super cool. All right, so some things to leave you with. Recognize that when all you do, when data and decisions are overwhelming, humans don't calculate. We don't. We feel our way forward. Think about that in all you do, right? You feel your way forward. And experience has clinical implications. So like that study with the nurses, like the work, if we design the emotional and behavioral engagements around the data, things simply change for us. We have to understand what those are. We have to understand when a customer is frustrated and respond to it accordingly. And if you want to find me, that's how you find me. Thanks.
Wonderful talk as always, Rich. Is there any quick questions for Rich before we move on? Yes.
Kara.
Oh.
The reality of the business is that you're meeting customers at very bad moments in time. And sometimes the experience that we need to create is by almost not being there, right? Because, I mean, I've sat in a room with pharmaceutical or healthcare organizations that are like, oh, we'll send them a text after the doctor's visit and give them guidance on how to get their prescription. And it's like they just got a life-altering diagnosis. Like, I don't think it's time. So how do you take that into account in terms of the happiness index or the feel-good index of, like, sometimes helping them feel good is making them something they don't have to think about?
There's a guy named Sunny Vu. He's a designer. He's a tech designer. He created a thing called the Misfit Wearables, and then he went to Fossil and designed some health products for them. And he has this great quote that it becomes increasingly beautiful as it becomes increasingly invisible. It just never happened. The bad stuff just never happened. It just went away. So designing for invisibility is a really cool thing because, do you really want them to have another thing to do?
Wonderful. Any additional questions for Rich? Nope. All right. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rich.